When my son-in-law told me I had to pay him to see my grandchildren, I thought he was joking. I waited for the smirk, for that awkward laugh that would turn the insult into bad humor. But he just stood there, arms crossed, phone in hand, eyes cold as steel, and repeated it. Gas isn't free, Harlan. My time isn't either. You want to see the kids? $100 per visit. Cash. I'm not a man who angers easily. 72 years teach you how to control your temper, especially when the ones testing it are half your age. But that day, something inside me cracked. Not loudly, not explosively, just a quiet fracture that I knew would never heal the same way again. My name's Harlan Royce, and I spent my whole life building bridges, literally and metaphorically. As a civil engineer, I'd drawn blueprints for things meant to connect people. But no bridge can hold when one side keeps burning it for profit. That Saturday morning, I'd driven an hour and a half to see my grandkids, Emma and Jack. They were 7 and 9, all freckles and laughter. I hadn't seen them in 3 months, not since my daughter, Melissa, married Ethan. I still remember their wedding. White roses, champagne laughter, promises whispered over a sunset that cost more than my first house. Back then, I thought Ethan was simply ambitious. I didn't realize he was the kind of man who measures affection in currency. He met me at their driveway wearing loafers without socks, the kind rich men wear in car commercials. His shirt was crisp white, sleeves rolled halfway up like he'd just come from solving something important. I tried to hand him a small box, a wooden toy car I'd carved for Jack, but he didn't take it. You know, Harlan, he said, it's not really fair. You get to come, hang out, have fun, and I'm the one taking care of the kids full time. I lose hours when you visit. So, I figured it's time we make things even. Even, I repeated, my throat dry. Yeah, $100 a visit. 2 kids, that's a bargain. I laughed, thinking it would break the tension. It didn't. He just looked at me like I was the one being unreasonable. Melissa agreed to this. I asked. He shrugged. She's tired, Harlan. She doesn't need the stress. Let's just handle this man-to-man. I left without saying another word. The drive back home was quiet. No music, no talk radio, not even the hum of air conditioning. Just my thoughts, raw and heavy. How did we get here? How did my daughter, my only child, marry a man who could look me in the eye and say that love had a price tag? When I pulled into my driveway, the sun was setting behind the oak trees I planted 40 years ago. The house looked too big now. My wife, Clara, passed 5 years ago, and every room still carried her presence. The lavender scent on her pillow, the tiny notes she used to leave on the fridge, water the roses, love. I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the box of toys I'd made for the kids over the years. All untouched, all waiting for small hands that no longer came. That night, I poured myself a small glass of bourbon, something I rarely did since Clara's death, and I thought about Ethan's words. $100 per visit. Not just cruel, calculated. He knew I wouldn't say no to seeing my grandkids. He knew he could use my love as leverage. But he also didn't know me as well as he thought. You see, I may be old, but I didn't spend 72 years learning patience just to waste it. I've seen men like him before, men who mistake kindness for weakness. So, I decided to play along. I picked up a plain white envelope from the drawer, slipped in something, and sealed it shut. Next weekend, I'd drive back to his house. I'd give him that envelope. And then, I'd let him open it. I didn't sleep much that week. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Ethan's smirk, that arrogant curl of the mouth that said he'd won something. But he hadn't. Not yet. On Thursday, I walked into the old study Clara used to call my sanctuary. It still smelled of sawdust and cedar. My tools were laid out neatly, the same ones I'd used to build Emma's dollhouse and Jack's tree fort. That room always reminded me of purpose, of creating something lasting. So when I sat at my workbench and slid the white envelope toward me, I didn't see it as revenge. I saw it as correction, the balancing of scales. Inside, I placed something that would change everything. No threats, no shouting, just truth, written plainly on paper, sealed with calm. Saturday came bright and cloudless. I ironed my best shirt, the blue one Clara always liked, and drove the familiar road out of town. The air smelled of early autumn, damp leaves, wood smoke, and quiet expectation. When I pulled into Melissa's driveway, the kids were playing in the yard, laughing around the sprinkler. That sound hit me harder than I expected. I parked, stepped out, and waved. Grandpa, Emma was the first to run to me, hair sticking to her forehead, eyes glowing with joy. Jack followed, holding a wet plastic sword like a knight on a mission. I knelt down, hugged them both, and for a moment, the world made sense again. Mom said you might come. Jack grinned. You brought the car? Of course, I said, handing him the little wooden toy. Made it myself. Rolls faster than the wind. Melissa came out onto the porch then. Her smile looked tired, hesitant. Dad, she said softly. You didn't have to come today. I wanted to. I interrupted gently. It's been too long. Behind her, Ethan appeared, phone still in hand, sunglasses still on. Some people hide behind power, others hide behind style. He was the latter. Well, look who decided to pay a visit, he said with a smirk. Got the cash. The words made my daughter flinch. I caught it, that small, involuntary twitch of shame, and my resolve hardened. I do, I said calmly, pulling the envelope from my jacket. Right here. He reached for it instantly, his fingers twitching like he couldn't wait to count the money. Good man, he said, taking it. We can make this a regular arrangement. I nodded. I was hoping you'd say that. He didn't open the envelope then. He probably thought it was full of bills, maybe even a generous tip. He slipped it into his pocket and turned back toward the house. Come on, Melissa said awkwardly. Let's have some coffee. We sat in the living room, sunlight spilling through the wide windows. The kids were showing me their drawings, their little world unspoiled by adult greed. For 2 hours, I laughed, listened, and let Ethan think he'd gotten away with it. When I finally left, he shook my hand. His grip was smug. Pleasure doing business with you, he said. I looked him right in the eye. Oh, the pleasure's all mine. That night, I imagined him sitting on his expensive leather couch, sipping his overpriced scotch, opening that white envelope, expecting money. But inside, there was only one crisp dollar bill and a handwritten note that said, You've already been paid, with patience. But that's running out. H.R. Simple, silent, precise. And the beauty of it was, that was only the beginning. Because I had something much bigger planned. Something that wouldn't just cost him money. It would cost him respect. On Sunday morning, I was sipping coffee at my kitchen table when my phone buzzed. The screen lit up with Melissa's name. For a moment, I hesitated. My heart said to answer, but my gut told me to wait. I let it ring twice before picking up. Dad, she started, her voice trembling slightly. Ethan, he found your note. I smiled to myself. I thought he might. He's furious, she said. He said you were mocking him. He wants to come over and talk. I took another slow sip of coffee. He's welcome anytime. My door's always open. An hour later, a silver SUV screeched into my driveway. Ethan stepped out, still in that same expensive shirt, though his sleeves were rolled up higher this time. A small man's attempt to look tough. He stormed up the porch and didn't bother to knock. You think this is funny, old man? He barked, slamming the door behind him. You made me look like an idiot in front of my wife. I stayed seated, calm as a winter pond. Then perhaps you shouldn't have acted like one. He froze, blinking in disbelief. You owe me an apology. No, I said. I owe you an education. He paced the room, breathing hard. You think you can embarrass me with a stupid note? I could. What? Cut me off from my grandchildren? I said quietly. You already did that. That shut him up. For the first time, he didn't have a quick answer ready. He just glared, jaw clenched, hands trembling slightly. You don't know who you're dealing with, he said finally. Oh, I do, I replied. I just think you don't. He stared at me like he was trying to read something in my face. Maybe fear, maybe regret. But he found none. Get ready, he said, walking toward the door. I'll make sure Melissa understands who the real problem is here. When the door closed behind him, the house fell silent again. I looked at Clara's old photo on the mantel, her soft smile frozen in time, and whispered, It's starting. That night, I began phase 2. See, I wasn't just some lonely grandfather with a soft heart. I'd spent 40 years managing construction projects, contracts, accounts, city permits. I knew how to trace every cent and where people try to hide theirs. And Ethan? He ran his marketing company out of a rented office. A company that had been taking consulting fees from Melissa's family fund. I'd noticed that little discrepancy the day I helped her with some tax paperwork last year. Back then, I said nothing. Now, it was time to make use of it. I logged into my old desktop computer, the one gathering dust in the corner. It took nearly 10 minutes to boot up, humming like an old friend clearing its throat. I opened the files I'd quietly copied, bank statements, emails, invoices, and there it was, Harlan Royce Consulting, billing his own wife's inheritance trust for financial advising. He'd been stealing from her since the day they married. Over the next few days, I made calls. Quiet ones. A lawyer I trusted. A retired accountant I'd mentored years ago. Nothing noisy, not yet. Just gathering strings I could pull when the time was right. Meanwhile, Harlan began showing cracks. Melissa called me 3 times that week, saying he'd been irritable, nervous, distracted. He'd started locking his office door and snapping at the kids. Guilt was setting in, not moral guilt, but the fear of losing control. By Friday, I sent him a text. Just one line. The next envelope won't be empty. Within 5 minutes, he replied, "You're bluffing." I didn't answer. I didn't have to, because I knew exactly what he feared most, exposure. That weekend, I sat back in my armchair, the fireplace flickering. Outside, the autumn wind whispered through the trees. I wasn't angry anymore. I was focused. People like Harlan never see the slow tide coming. They think control is forever. But when the water starts to rise, it's always quiet at first. And I had all the time in the world. By the next week, the air had changed. You could feel it even before anyone said a word. Melissa's voice on the phone was softer, uncertain. Harlan's arrogance was thinning out like cheap paint. The man who once strutted around like he owned the world was beginning to watch over his shoulder. He didn't know it yet, but the moment he opened that first envelope, he had already started playing my game. I stopped by their house on Thursday, unannounced. Melissa answered the door this time, surprise lighting up her face. "Dad, you didn't call." "I missed my grandkids," I said simply, "and I thought I'd bring something for Harlan." Her smile faded a little. "He's in his office." "Perfect." I stepped inside. The kids ran to hug me, and I hugged them tight, letting the warmth of their little arms sink into the cold plan I was about to carry out. Harlan appeared at the top of the stairs, his expression somewhere between irritation and unease. "You again?" "I told you," I said, smiling. "I came to pay for my visit." From my jacket, I pulled out another envelope, thick this time. His eyes flickered with interest before suspicion set in. "Don't mess with me, old man." "I wouldn't dream of it," I said. "Why don't you open it?" He snatched it, tore it open, and froze. Inside wasn't money, but a stack of papers. "What the hell is this?" he demanded. "Financial records," I said calmly, walking toward the window. "Your business filings. The ones showing how you've been billing your wife's trust account as consulting revenue. You're stealing from her, Harlan. From your own family." He went pale, the blood draining from his face. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Oh, I know plenty. Including the part where your company lists clients that don't exist. That's tax fraud. Small, but still enough to ruin you if it reached the right people." His hands trembled as he held the papers. "You can't prove any of this." I turned and looked him in the eye. "Harlan, I already have." He followed me outside, his voice breaking. "You wouldn't do that to your daughter." I stopped by my car and looked back at him. "I wouldn't have to, if you stopped before she found out on her own. But you won't, will you?" His jaw worked furiously, but no words came. Just silent rage. "I'm not asking for anything," I said. "Just decency. You give me that, and this conversation never happened." Then I got into my car, left the driveway, and let him stew in silence. That night, I sat by the window in my living room, watching the rain bead down the glass. The old house creaked with age, but the sound was comforting, like it was breathing with me, waiting. At 9:30, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "We need to talk." "Alone?" I smiled. The panic was working. The predator was feeling the trap. We met the next day at a diner off Highway 6. One of those places where the coffee is burnt and the waitresses know everyone's secrets. Harlan arrived late, looking like he hadn't slept. He sat across from me, leaned in, and whispered, "What do you want?" I looked at him, then out the window, as if thinking about something far away. "Nothing. I just want to see my grandkids without you turning it into a transaction." "That's it," he said, incredulous. "That's it," I replied. "You stop treating them, and me, like a source of income. You be a husband, not a parasite. And in return, I make sure no one ever sees those papers." He hesitated. His pride wanted to say no, but fear was louder now. He finally nodded, muttering, "Fine." I smiled. "Good. Then we understand each other. As he walked out, I saw him glance back once. A hollow look, like a man who'd just realized the ground beneath him wasn't solid. I waited until he left, then reached into my coat pocket and took out a second set of identical papers, neatly folded. I placed them in a plain manila envelope labeled for Melissa. No matter what Ethan said that day, I knew him. Men like him don't change, they just hide better. And when he slipped again, which he would, I wanted the truth ready to land where it belonged. I slid the envelope into my glove box and whispered to myself, insurance. For a week after that diner meeting, things were eerily calm. Melissa called me twice, both times sounding lighter than before. Ethan's different lately, she said once. He's spending more time with the kids, helping with dinner, even clean the garage. I could hear the cautious hope in her voice, that fragile belief people cling to when they think broken things can still be fixed. But I knew better. Ethan wasn't changing. He was covering. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, I got a message from my lawyer friend, Joel. You were right. Ethan moved a large sum out of Melissa's trust last month. Offshore account. Sending you the report. I opened the attached document, and there it was, proof that Ethan had doubled down instead of backing off. A snake doesn't stop biting when cornered. It just hides its fangs until it's safe again. That night, I visited Melissa. I didn't plan to confront her, not yet. I just wanted to see. When she opened the door, she looked worn out. Her eyes were shadowed, and her voice trembled when she said, Dad, I think something's wrong with Ethan. He's been jumpy, secretive. I nodded slowly. Did you ask him about it? He says he's stressed from work, she said, fidgeting with her wedding ring. But I can feel something's off. Inside, I saw Ethan sitting on the couch with his phone, pretending not to hear us. The TV flickered across his face, but his eyes weren't watching it. They were watching me. That same hollow look from the diner, only now mixed with fear. Evening, Ethan, I said. He gave a tight smile. Harlan, to what do we owe the pleasure? I came to see the kids, I said evenly, and maybe a bit of peace. He smirked faintly. You love stirring trouble, don't you? Only when it needs stirring, I replied. Dinner that night was quiet, tense. The kids chatted about school. Melissa tried to keep the air light. Ethan, meanwhile, could barely sit still. He laughed too loudly at small jokes, cut me off when I spoke, and checked his phone every few minutes like he was waiting for bad news. When Emma asked if I'd come to her school play next week, Ethan interrupted before I could answer. We'll see, he said sharply. Depends if Grandpa's schedule allows it. I met his eyes. It always does. That shut him up, but I saw the muscle in his jaw twitch. He was unraveling. After dinner, Melissa went to put the kids to bed. Ethan stood by the window, drink in hand. You think you've won, don't you? He muttered. I didn't know we were competing, I said. He turned, stepping closer. You're turning her against me. No, Ethan. You're doing that all by yourself. He pointed the glass toward me, his voice low and venomous. You don't get to come into my house and treat me like some charity case. This isn't your house, I said quietly. It's hers, and you've been living off her generosity long enough. That one landed. His eyes went dark, not angry, but desperate. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. If you tell her anything, I'll make sure you never see those kids again. I smiled faintly. You already tried that once. Didn't work, remember? He clenched his fists, but before he could speak, Melissa came back into the room. I turned toward her and said gently, Thank you for dinner, sweetheart. I'll see you soon. Then I left. That night, I sat at my desk, staring at the manila envelope labeled for Melissa. It wasn't time yet. Ethan was still clinging to his illusion of control, and if I broke it too early, she might see me as the villain. No, he had to expose himself. So, I made a small adjustment. I printed one of the documents, a wire transfer receipt showing Ethan's name, the date, and the foreign bank. Then I mailed it anonymously to Melissa's office address. No note, no warning, just truth. 3 days later, I got a call from her, her voice shaking. Dad, Ethan's gone. He didn't come home last night. Did something happen? I asked, keeping my tone steady. He said he had a business trip, but I checked. The company he mentioned doesn't exist. My silence told her everything. Dad, she whispered, did you know something? I hesitated. I know you deserve honesty, sweetheart, and you're about to find it. That night, I pulled out a third envelope. Not for Ethan this time. This one was for the IRS. By the time the letter reached the IRS, I'd already stopped thinking about revenge. It wasn't anger driving me anymore. It was something colder, the kind of justice that doesn't need applause or witnesses. Just balance. The envelope had gone out on a Wednesday morning. Inside was everything. Bank transfers, false invoices, names of non-existent clients, and one short note signed only with initials. H.R. Simple. Anonymous. Enough to make someone start asking questions. Friday afternoon, I was sitting on the porch, carving a small wooden bird when Melissa's car pulled into my driveway. She stepped out slowly, her eyes red, her hands shaking around a folded stack of papers. "Dad," she said, voice trembling. "I found everything." I set down the carving knife. "Everything?" She nodded, tears brimming. "The offshore accounts. The false billing. He's been stealing from me for years." I stood up and opened my arms. She walked into them like a child again, her body trembling with disbelief and heartbreak. "I thought he loved us," she whispered. "I thought he just worked too much." "Sweetheart," I said softly, "some men only love control. When they lose it, they start to show who they really are." Ethan didn't come home that night, or the next. By Monday, his office had been locked by federal investigators. One of Melissa's friends, a paralegal, told her the IRS had frozen all his business accounts. They were looking into discrepancies. He tried to call her once from an unknown number. She didn't answer. Instead, she called me. "Dad, did you have anything to do with this?" I paused for a moment, the silence stretching between us like a thin sheet of glass. "What matters," I said, "is that you and the kids are safe." She didn't press further. Maybe she didn't want to know. Or maybe she already did. 2 weeks later, Ethan showed up at my door. He looked like a ghost. Hair unkempt, eyes bloodshot, clothes wrinkled. The arrogance that once filled every corner of his posture was gone. "Please," he said hoarsely. "They're investigating me." Melissa froze the accounts. "I have nothing. I need help." I studied him for a long time, letting the silence hang heavy. "Help?" I repeated quietly. "You want me to pay you again?" He winced. "Don't." "Why not?" I said, my tone calm but sharp. "You set a price on everything else. My time, my love, my family. You sold my grandchildren's smiles for $100 a visit. Tell me, Ethan, what's your dignity worth now?" He lowered his eyes, unable to speak. "Do you remember that first envelope?" I asked. He nodded. "Well," I said, reaching into my coat pocket, "here's the last one." I handed him a plain envelope, lighter than it looked. He opened it slowly, expecting money again. Instead, inside was a small folded photograph. Me, Melissa, Emma, and Jack at the park last weekend. On the back, in Clara's old handwriting, the one I'd copied from her notes, were 4 words. "Family isn't for sale." He stared at it for a long moment. His hands trembled. Then he set it down on my porch railing, unable to look at me. "Get off my property, Ethan," I said quietly. He hesitated. "You'll regret this." "I already regret ever trusting you," I said. "But unlike you, I can live with my regrets." He left without another word. His car engine coughed to life, then faded down the road into the silence of dusk. That night, I sat alone by the fireplace. The flames danced low, painting the walls in gold and shadow. I looked at the photograph again, the one he'd left behind, and smiled. Some victories don't need witnesses. Some wars end not with explosions, but with the quiet sound of a door closing forever. And for the first time in years, I felt something like peace. The following weeks passed like rainwater down an old window, steady, slow, and strangely quiet. Ethan was gone, vanished without warning. His office was stripped bare, his car abandoned behind a gas station outside town. Some said he'd fled the country. Others whispered that he was hiding in a motel somewhere, waiting for things to blow over. But for me, it didn't matter. His absence wasn't a mystery. It was closure. Melissa moved back into her childhood home for a while, just her and the kids. I made up the spare bedrooms, cooked breakfast like Clara used to, and filled the silence with warmth again. For the first time in years, the house felt alive. Every morning, Emma and Jack would run down the stairs giggling, still half asleep, and Melissa would follow with coffee in hand, her face softer, calmer. It was small moments like that, laughter echoing through a home once haunted by loneliness, that told me I'd done the right thing. Not the easy thing, but the right one. One evening, As the sun bled orange over the trees, Melissa and I sat on the porch watching the kids chase fireflies in the yard. "Do you think he's coming back?" she asked quietly. I thought for a long moment. Men like Ethan only come back when they think there's still something to take. He's got nothing left here. She nodded slowly, looking out into the fading light. I keep asking myself how I didn't see it, how I didn't notice what he was doing. "You saw what you needed to see," I said softly. "We all do, until we can't anymore." She leaned her head on my shoulder, and for a moment, it felt like she was 10 again, sitting beside me after scraping her knee, needing only presence, not answers. A few days later, she found the last envelope I'd kept hidden, the one marked for Melissa. I hadn't meant for her to find it yet, but maybe it was time. She came to me that night, holding it in both hands. "I read everything," she said quietly. "The records, the letters, even the note you sent to the IRS. Her voice didn't carry anger. It carried understanding. "You did what I couldn't," she continued. "You protected us, even when it meant destroying what was left of him." I swallowed hard, my throat suddenly dry. I didn't want revenge, Mel. I just wanted peace for this family. "I know," she said, tears glinting in her eyes. "Mom would have been proud of you." Her words hit harder than any blow Ethan ever could have delivered. I looked away, blinking against the sting in my chest. That night, after they'd all gone to bed, I stepped outside. The air was cool, heavy with the scent of rain. Crickets sang in the tall grass. I looked up at the sky and whispered, "Clara, it's done." For the first time in a long while, the wind didn't sound lonely. It sounded like release. A week later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. Ethan, standing beside a rundown bar in Arizona, thinner, older, broken. No words. Just proof he was alive and far away. I stared at it for a long moment, then fed it to the fire. Some ghosts are better left unchaste. That night, before heading to bed, I checked on Emma and Jack. They were asleep, their small faces peaceful in the glow of the nightlight. I knelt by their beds, brushed back their hair, and whispered, "You'll never have to pay to be loved." Then I turned off the light and walked out of the room, closing the door gently behind me. The house had become peaceful again. Not silent, peaceful. There's a difference. Silence feels like emptiness. Peace feels like a deep breath finally exhaled after years of holding it in. Each morning now, I'd wake before the sun, make a pot of black coffee, and sit by the old oak desk in my study. The same desk where I once planned bridges and buildings now held a single purpose, my notebook. Every day, I wrote a letter. Not to anyone living, but to Clara. "Dear Clara, you'd be proud of our girl. She's strong, stronger than I ever gave her credit for. The kids are happy, loud, messy, full of life. You'd love it. The garden is blooming again, too. I planted those lavender bushes you always talked about. The ones you said made the world smell like forgiveness. Sometimes, I still expect you to walk through that door with your hands full of grocery bags, complaining about prices. I'd give anything to hear that again. You're Harlan." I'd seal each letter, fold it neatly, and place it in the top drawer of her old dresser. I didn't know why I kept them. Maybe because some things deserve to be said, even if no one hears them. Melissa noticed one morning. "You've been writing a lot lately," she said over breakfast, smiling softly. "It helps," I told her. "Gives me a place to put the things I can't say out loud." She nodded. Maybe I should start too. There was healing in that house again, slow, quiet, but steady. Sometimes, on my walks through the yard, I'd think about Ethan. Not with anger anymore, but with an odd sort of pity. People like him spend their lives building towers out of lies, and when they fall, they're always surprised the ground hurts so much. I'd learned something through all this. Revenge isn't satisfaction. It's revelation. It shows you who people are and who you've become. For a long time, I was scared I'd turned into something cold, calculating. But then Emma ran up one afternoon, hands full of dandelions, and said, "Grandpa, I made you a bouquet." And in that small, innocent moment, all the bitterness melted. Maybe justice doesn't need to roar. Maybe it just needs to protect what's pure. That night, I wrote another letter. "Dear Clara, I think you were right. Time really does heal, but only after it teaches. I spent so long trying to correct the world that I forgot to simply live in it. But I'm learning again. The kids bring laughter back into these old walls, and Melissa's smile looks like yours did the day we first met. As for Ethan, he's gone. I don't wish him pain. Just distance. I think that's punishment enough. Sleep well, my love. The bridges are holding. Harlan. When I finished, I sat back, letting the pen fall from my hand. The night outside was still, the kind that carries only one sound: peace. For the first time since Clara's passing, I didn't feel alone. Just whole. It was late October when I saw him again. The air carried that early bite of winter, the kind that turns every breath into fog. The days were shorter now, but I didn't mind. Darkness felt honest. It didn't hide what it was. I was sitting by the fire, Emma and Jack asleep upstairs, when I heard a soft knock at the door. 3 slow taps. Not desperate, not demanding, just hesitant. For a moment, I thought it might be Melissa, but something in the rhythm told me otherwise. When I opened the door, the porch light fell on a face I barely recognized. Harlan Royce. He was thinner now, gaunt, unshaven, eyes sunken deep into dark hollows. His hair, once perfectly slicked back, hung limp and streaked with gray. The expensive clothes were gone, replaced by a frayed jacket and trembling hands. Harlan, he whispered, voice cracking. Please. I didn't know where else to go. I didn't answer, just stared at him. The man who'd once told me to pay to see my own grandchildren was now standing in front of me, broke, lost, and shivering. Karma doesn't always knock loudly. Sometimes it whispers. Finally, I said, you've got some nerve coming here. He nodded weakly. I know. I need to talk. I stepped aside, just enough to let him in, not out of pity, but because I wanted to hear what a man sounds like after losing everything. He sat by the fire, staring into the flames. They took everything, he said. The house, the cars, the accounts. I can't even open a bank card without it getting flagged. Good, I said flatly. He swallowed. I know I deserve it. I lied. I stole. I used everyone. But when you turned me in, I thought you'd ruined my life. Now I realize you saved it. I leaned forward, studying his face. Saved it? You call this saving? I was headed somewhere worse, he said quietly. If it hadn't been you, it would have been prison, or worse. I know you hate me. I just needed to say I'm sorry. For a long moment, the only sound was the crackle of the fire. I thought about all the nights I'd spent alone, staring at the empty chairs where my family used to sit. All the birthdays I'd missed because of his greed. All the shame Melissa carried because she thought love could change a man like him. And then I thought about the children upstairs, sleeping peacefully, unscarred by this darkness. I don't hate you, Harlan, I said finally. I pity you, because you still think an apology fixes what you broke. I just want forgiveness, he whispered. I stood up slowly. Forgiveness isn't a gift. It's earned, and I don't have that kind of time left to wait for you to earn it. He nodded, eyes glistening. I understand. He stood, adjusted his coat, and turned toward the door. Before he stepped outside, I said softly, Harlan. He looked back. If you truly want to change, do it far from here. The kids deserve peace, not ghosts. He nodded once, a single tear cutting through the dirt on his cheek. I'll disappear, he said. I promise. And he did. I watched him walk down the driveway until the night swallowed him whole. When I closed the door, the warmth from the fire wrapped around me, but it wasn't comfort I felt. It was release. I went upstairs, checked on Emma and Jack, and tucked the blanket tighter around them. Then, as I turned off the light, I whispered, mercy isn't weakness. It's just knowing when enough is enough. The next morning, I wrote one final letter. Dear Clara. He came back. Not for money, not for power, for forgiveness. I gave him what little I could. Peace to go, not stay. Maybe that's the best kind of mercy there is. The children are safe. Melissa's healing. And me? I think I'm ready to rest, too. If love is a bridge, then ours is still standing. Always yours, Harlan. When I sealed that letter and placed it in the drawer, I knew the story was over. Not his story, not Melissa's, but mine. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a man who'd lost everything. I felt like one who'd finally let everything go. Winter came softly that year. It didn't roar in with storms or warnings. It crept in gently, like forgiveness, blanketing everything in calm. The snow arrived one quiet night, and by morning, the world outside my window looked reborn. The old oak tree in the yard wore a crown of white, and the air shimmered with that delicate stillness that only snow can bring. Inside, the house was alive again. I could hear laughter upstairs, Emma's high, bubbling giggles, and Jack's small, determined voice arguing about where to hang the next ornament on the Christmas tree. Melissa hummed an old song her mother used to love, and for a brief, golden moment, I felt Clara's presence so strongly it was as if she'd just stepped out of the room to fetch cocoa. It had been months since Ethan's final visit. He never came back. No letters. No calls. Not a trace of the man who once tried to put a price on love. Some said he'd left the country. Others thought he'd found a small job somewhere out west. But for me, he was simply gone, like a storm that finally ran out of rain. That morning, I sat by the window with my coffee, watching snowflakes drift lazily through the air. My reflection stared back at me, older, softer somehow. The lines around my eyes weren't from anger anymore, but from time. Time has a way of smoothing even the deepest scars if you let it. On my desk sat the old leather notebook where I'd written all my letters to Clara. 63 of them now. Some short, just a few lines. Others pages long, filled with thoughts I couldn't speak aloud. But today, there was a new page waiting. Not for Clara this time. For them. I reached for my pen, feeling the familiar weight between my fingers, and began to write. My dear family, if you're reading this someday, it means I've finally gone to be with your grandmother. I hope you don't cry long. She wouldn't like that. She used to say, tears are good for flowers, not for hearts. I think she was right. By now you've grown. Maybe you have families of your own. Maybe you've learned, as I once did, that the world isn't fair, but it can still be beautiful. That people will hurt you, sometimes even the ones you love, but that forgiveness doesn't make you weak. It makes you free. Don't waste your life waiting for apologies. Sometimes, the only closure you'll ever get is understanding that you deserved better all along. And if anyone ever tries to tell you that love, or time, or kindness should come with a price tag, remember this. Nothing that's truly yours will ever need to be bought. The pen scratched softly against the paper as I wrote, the fire crackling nearby. I could hear the muffled thump of feet upstairs, Jack running, Emma chasing. Then a soft crash, followed by Melissa's laugh echoing down the hallway. That sound, laughter, was the truest music I'd ever known. I paused, smiling to myself, and wrote on. I know you'll make mistakes. Everyone does. But promise me this, don't let bitterness become your shadow. When you hold anger too long, it starts holding you back. Let things go before they grow roots. The world will tell you strength means standing tall. But sometimes strength is just standing at all. When you miss me, don't look for me in old photos. Look for me in the small things, the smell of sawdust, the sound of rain on the porch, the taste of coffee on a cold morning. That's where I'll be. In every quiet kindness you give, in every moment you choose peace instead of pride. I was far from perfect. I made mistakes, too. But I loved you with everything I had left. That's the one thing I know I did right. I stopped writing and looked around the room. The shelves were filled with small wooden toys I'd made for the kids. Each one carved by hand, each one different. I reached for one, a small train, the paint chipped on the edge, and turned it over in my palm. Underneath, etched faintly, were the initials H.R. I smiled. Even the smallest things carry your mark if love built them. I folded the letter carefully, slid it into an envelope, and tied it with a piece of Clara's old lavender ribbon. Then I placed it inside the wooden box on the mantel, the same box that once held the toy cars I made for Jack. A box of beginnings, now holding an ending. That afternoon, we went outside. The snow was thick but soft, falling in lazy spirals. Emma threw herself into it, making snow angels, while Jack tried to roll the perfect snowball and failed spectacularly. Melissa laughed, a sound that healed something in me each time I heard it. I stood at the edge of the yard, cane in one hand, watching them. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the weight of the past pressing on me. No resentment. No anger. Just the quiet realization that some stories don't end with revenge, they end with understanding. Dad, Melissa called. Come join us. I smiled and waved her off. You go ahead. I'll keep score from here. She rolled her eyes, just like her mother used to, and turned back to the kids. The wind shifted then, carrying a faint scent of lavender. My breath caught. Clara. I closed my eyes and could almost feel her beside me, her small, warm hand slipping into mine. I did it, I whispered to the air. They're safe now. The wind moved again, brushing my cheek like a kiss. And for a heartbeat, I thought I heard her voice. You always knew how to build bridges, Harlan. That night, After everyone went to bed, I sat by the fire one last time. The flames danced softly, throwing gold across the walls. I opened the notebook, flipped through the pages, through years of words, love, grief, and healing, and stopped on the very first letter I ever wrote to Clara after she passed. Dear Clara, it's too quiet here without you. I smiled faintly. Not anymore, I murmured. Then I tore that page out, placed it in the fire, and watched as it curled, glowed, and lifted in a spiral of orange light. A final message carried into the air. The next morning, Melissa came downstairs to find the wooden box on the mantel. She opened it slowly, saw the envelope, and read the first line. By the time she reached the end, her tears had turned into a smile. She folded the letter carefully, pressed it to her heart, and whispered, "Thank you, Dad, for everything." Emma and Jack ran into the room, tugging on her hands. "Mom, come see. It's still snowing." She wiped her eyes, took their hands, and stepped outside. As the door closed behind them, the camera of life pulled back, the old house standing warm against the white world, smoke curling from the chimney into the quiet morning air. In that stillness, it almost looked like time had stopped. But really, it was just beginning again, the next chapter of a family rebuilt not by revenge, but by love. And somewhere, beyond the snow, beyond the years, Clara and Harlan were together again. Two souls at peace, watching their legacy live on. 3 years passed. The winters came and went, each softer than the one before. The house still stood tall under the old oak, and though my steps had grown slower, my heart had never been lighter. The pain, the anger, the long nights of silence, all of it had faded into something gentler. Regret had turned into reflection. Revenge had turned into peace. Time, I learned, doesn't erase the scars. It just teaches you to stop tracing them. It was early spring when Melissa called me from the kitchen. "Dad, they're asking about you again," she said with a smile. "Something about stories." I was sitting in my old chair, polishing the wooden box on my lap, the one that had once held toy cars, later letters, and now memories. "What kind of stories?" I asked. Emma peeked around the corner, her hair tied up in a messy ponytail. "The ones you never finish," she laughed. Jack followed behind her, taller now, voice deeper. "Yeah, Grandpa, you always stop at the best part." I smiled, gesturing for them to come closer. "Well, some stories aren't meant to end. They just keep teaching." They sat down on the rug by my chair, the afternoon light spilling through the curtains and painting their faces in gold. The room smelled faintly of pine and old paper, my favorite combination. "You ever wonder why people build bridges?" I asked. Jack frowned thoughtfully. "To cross rivers?" "Sure," I said. "But why not just build boats?" He shrugged. "Boats move." "Exactly," I said. "Bridges stay. They let everyone cross, even after the builder's gone." Emma tilted her head. "Like you, Grandpa." I chuckled. "Maybe. Or maybe like your grandmother. She built bridges with her kindness. I just learned to walk across them." They smiled, not fully understanding, but that was all right. Some lessons bloom late. After they went outside, I opened the window and watched them chase each other through the yard. Their laughter echoed across the same lawn where I'd once stood, holding an envelope that changed everything. Sometimes, I still thought about Ethan. Not with hate, not even pity anymore, just curiosity. Where was he now? Did he rebuild his life somewhere far from here? Did he ever learn what love really was? I'd never know, and that was fine. Some answers aren't meant to find you. They're meant to leave you in peace. That night, I sat at my desk one last time. The fire crackled softly. Outside, a light drizzle tapped against the windows. I opened my notebook, the one filled with letters to Clara, and turned to a fresh page. "Dear Clara, it's been a while since I've written. Not because I forgot, but because I finally learned to live between the letters. The kids are growing fast." Melissa smiles again. "There's a warmth in this house I thought I'd never feel after you left. I still talk to you sometimes, mostly when no one's around. You'd laugh at how often I burn the toast. And you'd scold me for letting the coffee get cold before I drink it. But, love, I've kept my promise. I built a bridge strong enough for all of them to cross." I paused, my eyes catching the flicker of the flame in the glass. Clara's photograph sat on the desk. The same picture from our wedding day, her smile still young, her eyes still full of that patient kindness I never stopped chasing. I reached out and touched the edge of the frame. "You'd be proud of them," I whispered. They turned out better than I ever hoped. A gust of wind brushed the window, and for a heartbeat, I swore I could smell her lavender perfume again. I smiled. Maybe love never really leaves. It just changes rooms. The next morning, Melissa found me in my chair, the notebook still open beside me, the pen resting loosely between my fingers. The fire had long gone out, but the warmth in the room lingered. She didn't cry, not right away. Instead, she sat beside me, placed her hand on mine, and whispered, "Thank you, Dad, for everything." The funeral was small, just family and a few neighbors who still remembered when I'd built the town's first footbridge decades ago. The same one that still crossed Willow Creek, still standing strong after all these years. As they lowered me beside Clara, the wind picked up softly, scattering a few dandelion seeds over the grass. Melissa smiled through her tears. "He'd like that," she whispered. Emma held the wooden box close to her chest. Inside were all the letters, every word I'd ever written to her grandmother, sealed with years of love. When she opened one later that night, a page fluttered free. It wasn't signed, but the handwriting was steady, firm, full of peace. "Don't mourn me too long. I've simply gone ahead to check the bridge." Years passed again. The Royce family grew, marriages, children, laughter. Emma became a teacher. Jack studied engineering, like I once did. He even rebuilt the old oak porch after a storm, refusing to let anyone else touch it. Grandpa would have wanted it sturdy, he said. On the mantel above the fireplace, the wooden box stayed. Dust never dared to settle on it. Sometimes, on quiet evenings, Melissa would take it down, read a letter, and smile through her tears. One of them became a family motto, framed in the living room. Family isn't who shares your name. It's who protects your heart. Every December, on the first snowfall, the family gathered at the old house. They'd light a fire, drink cocoa, and tell stories about me. About the man who gave an envelope instead of a fist, who built peace instead of revenge. And somewhere beyond the quiet snow, maybe Clara and I were still watching, not as ghosts, but as warmth, as memory, as love that never priced itself. Because in the end, the greatest revenge isn't making others regret losing you. It's giving the world a reason to remember that you lived with grace. The house still stands. The oak still grows. And the bridge at Willow Creek, the one I built all those years ago, still holds firm. Children cross it on their way to school. Lovers carve their initials in its railings. And when the river rises each spring, the water hums beneath it like a song. A song that says, "Some things, once built with love, never fall."